Good morning, everyone. I'm Christopher Hart, and it is my privilege to serve as chairman. Can we fix the feedback on the mic? Who's in control of the volume? Is that better? Good morning, I'm Christopher Hart, and it's my privilege to serve as chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board. Today I'm accompanied by my colleagues, Vice Chairman Bella Denzar, Member Robert Zumwalt, and Member Earl Weiner, to announce our 2016 Most Wanted list of transportation safety improvements. First, I would like to thank Neil Peterson and the Transportation Research Board for hosting us to announce our Most Wanted list for a third year. This convention is an excellent venue for us to announce our Most Wanted list because many items on the list require research to develop the best way to improve safety, and research, of course, is TRB's middle name. So I hope that our working together has been as beneficial to the TRB as it has been to us. The NTSB investigates transportation accidents, determines their cause, and issues safety recommendations to prevent recurrences. But we have no power to require that our recommendations be implemented. So it's a testament to the thoroughness of our amazing staff of accident investigators and the analysis that the recipients of our recommendations act favorably upon them more than 80% of the time, even though they don't have to. That leaves many recommendations that have not been implemented. For more than 25 years, we've issued our Most Wanted list to help spur action on these unimplemented recommendations. Our Most Wanted list is our roadmap from lessons learned to lives saved. Most of the items on a 2016 list, if implemented, will help to prevent accidents altogether. And one item on the list is intended to save lives and minimize injuries in those accidents that do nonetheless occur. Some areas on this year's list remain from last year: in substance impairment in transportation, disconnect from deadly distractions, prevent loss of control in flight in general aviation, and require medical fitness for duty. We've also added or reinstated several other issue areas. How do we decide what goes on the list each year? The extent to which an improvement can help save lives and reduce injuries is a factor, but not the only factor. If it were the only factor, all the items would relate to highway crashes, where the vast majority of transportation deaths and injuries occur. We also look at so-called bang for the buck, how to use our limited resources most effectively to improve safety. The fact that an issue is not on our list does not mean that we are not interested in it. Rather, it means that there are more effective and efficient ways for us to improve safety. Let's begin with aviation. The good news is that airline accidents have become, thankfully, very rare in America. The bad news is that the fatal accident rate in general aviation, the aspect of aviation that many people are not familiar with, has been stubbornly resistant to improvement for many years. The worst single cause of general aviation fatal accidents has been loss of control in flight, inadvertent spins and stalls, which has taken more than 1,200 lives from 2008 to 2014. We are again pushing for better pilot training, currency, self-assessment, and more vigilant situational awareness, aided by improving technologies such as angle of attack indicators. Many of our most wanted issues relate to all modes of transportation, but their impact is most significant on our highways. One example is substance impairment. In the last 15 years, about 1/3 of highway deaths involved an alcohol-impaired driver. But alcohol is only one impairing drug. In the State of the Union address last night, the President mentioned helping people who are battling prescription drug abuse. Recently, we are seeing that prescribed, over-the-counter, and recreational drugs are exacerbating the problem of impaired driving. We are also concerned about the emergence of synthetic drugs. Impairment is a multifaceted problem, and it will take stricter laws, better enforcement of those laws, and improved education to get impaired drivers off of our roads, and it will take all of these measures in addition to technological solutions to prevent people from driving impaired in the first place. The President also mentioned making technology work for us, not against us. Throughout transportation, technology has saved countless lives, and many of our most wanted list items this year are intended to help take advantage of new technologies to save countless more lives. But some of these new technologies are also creating more opportunities for distraction. As with impairment, we have investigated accidents involving distraction throughout all transportation modes. Regarding highways, All but a few states prohibit texting while driving. Many states prohibit handheld cell phone use while driving, but no state prohibits hands-free cell phone use while driving. Hands-free cell phone use causes cognitive distraction. We have recommended prohibiting all cell phone use, including hands-free, because a driver's mind must be on the driving, just as their hands must be on the wheel. Fatigue and medical fitness for duty are also multimodal concerns that take their toll not only on highways, but throughout all transportation modes. The basic problem here is that most commercial transportation is 24/7, but humans are not. We all remember the drowsy driving crash on the New Jersey Turnpike that seriously injured comedian Tracy Morgan and killed fellow comedian James McNair. Amazingly, the driver was in compliance with the applicable rest and duty time rules, yet he had been awake for 28 straight hours before that crash. Medical fitness for duty often interacts with fatigue. As Americans gain weight, we're seeing an increase in obstructive sleep apnea, which is strongly associated with body mass index. Sleep apnea often goes undiagnosed, and even if diagnosed, it often goes unreported for fear of adverse consequences, such as job loss. But sleep apnea is treatable. Employers with sleep apnea programs find that when people seek treatment, they become safer drivers, their morale improves, the cost of training new drivers decreases, and productivity increases. In other words, it's a total win-win. An impairing medical condition can be every bit as lethal as an impairing drug, and the public should not be subjected to risk from either. But even if all drivers were unimpaired, well-rested, and attentive, there would still be crashes because we are all human, and humans sometimes make mistakes. So we're also promoting wider availability of the next layer of protection on our highways, which is collision avoidance technologies. Currently available technologies for passenger cars, trucks, and buses could prevent a multitude of crashes on our highways. Last year, we were encouraged by NHTSA's move to add collision avoidance systems to the 5-star safety rating for cars. We look forward to the inclusion of these technologies on all highway vehicles. Seat belts are standard equipment rather than a luxury option, and the same should be true for collision avoidance technologies. And even seat belts, which have been required on most vehicles for decades, can only save lives when drivers and passengers use them. That is one reason that we are also pushing for better occupant protection. We will support primary enforcement of seatbelt use in every seating position in every vehicle that is so equipped, and age-appropriate restraints for youngsters. We are also looking at improved occupant protection in other modes of transportation. For example, in rail transportation, we will press for passenger rail cars that are more crashworthy. And we are seeking other life-saving changes in rail transportation, including advances in transit rail, passenger rail, and freight rail. We have seen far too many fatalities and injuries on rail mass transit, a daily transportation choice for millions of Americans. We are seeking to improve rail transit safety oversight to make this very safe choice even safer. A year ago yesterday, an electrical arcing and smoke event near WMATA's LaFont Plaza Metro Rail Station trapped hundreds of passengers in a smoke-filled tunnel. 86 people were treated on scene, 9 were transported to medical facilities, and tragically, 1 passenger died. Our investigators identified many safety issues that led to that event, several of which related to shortcomings in the safety oversight of WMATA. This year, we will continue to examine the way that the Federal Transit Administration is implementing such oversight, not only here in Washington, but nationwide. We are also urging the completion of 2 rail safety initiatives which appeared on last year's Most Wanted list: implementation of Positive Train Control, or PTC, and improvement of rail tank car safety. The NTSB has been advocating for PTC for more than 45 years. However, it took an act of Congress to require its implementation. In 2008, after a PTC preventable collision in Chatsworth, California killed 25 people and injured more than 100, Congress passed a law mandating PTC implementation by the end of 2015. In the 7 years between 2008 and the implementation deadline, last December 31st, there were many PTC preventable accidents. In freight rail, the NTSB investigated at least 11 PTC preventable accidents that resulted in fatalities, injuries, environmental damage, and/or evacuations. In passenger rail, PTC would have prevented the overspeed derailment in the Bronx in 2013 that killed 4 and injured 61, as well as the overspeed Amtrak derailment in Philadelphia in 2015 that killed 8 and injured more than 200. Now it's 2016, and according to the 2008 law, such tragedies should be things of the past. But the railroads missed the deadline. Faced with a looming rail shutdown, Congress extended the deadline to 2018, with further extensions possible. As a result, much of our rail infrastructure remains unprotected by PTC. Every PTC preventable accident, death, and injury on tracks and trains affected by the law will be a direct result of the missed 2015 deadline. Similarly, we are concerned that the DOT 111 tank cars that are being used to transport increased quantities of flammable liquids, such as crude oil and ethanol, are not up to the task. In 2013, a train carrying crude oil in DOT 111 tank cars destroyed much of the town of Lac-Mégantic, Canada, killing 47 people and forcing 2,000 to evacuate. The Department of Transportation has announced a rule phasing out the use of DOT 111s to transport flammable liquids by 2025. But 10 years is much too long. We have been lucky thus far that derailments involving flammable liquids in America have not yet occurred in a populated area. But an American version of Lac-Mégantic could happen at any time. All of these most wanted transportation safety improvements are the result of many meticulous accident investigations by our staff. Our most powerful tool to learn safety lessons from accident is data recorders. So we are looking for their increased use in all modes of transportation. Not only can they help us learn what causes accidents, but they can also be a valuable tool for identifying and fixing operational safety issues to prevent future accidents. Similarly, inward and outward facing cameras can help provide a view of the actions of operators and occupants in accidents in all transportation modes. And we are advancing for solutions that move us toward the day when we do not risk losing data even in deep ocean disasters, such as the loss of Malaysia Flight 370 and more recently, the tragic sinking of the El Faro. That completes our list for 2016 as we build the 21st century transportation system that the President spoke of last night. The NTSB will continue to press for safety improvements this year and into the future. To help spread the word, we've developed this short video overview of our most wanted list for 2016, and after the video, we'll be happy to take your questions. Thank you. The video, please. We are committed as one board to every one of these 10 life-saving transportation safety improvements, but we have assigned each issue to a member. So as I field your questions, I will refer them to the board member who's taking the lead on that issue. Thank you for attending, and we'd be happy to take your questions. Yes, please.
You've mentioned that some of these were up before, like positive train control is a perfect example. What's any frustration the fact that you brought this up year after year after year and more people keep dying because your safety recommendations are not implemented?
I'll refer that to Member Sumwalt, whose issue it is, but I'll just say that all the issues on this list are difficult by definition and take a lot of time by definition, and that's why they're on this list, because they are going to require more effort and they require more push from everybody, including us, to make them happen. Member Sumwalt.
I think that's
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
It seems like your frustration level is with PTC and the fact that Congress let it go by.
Robert. That's called empowerment.
It is frustrating, and as some of you know, some of you were up in Philadelphia in May when we had the Amtrak crash, and it's very frustrating, and it's sad to go to accidents where we keep seeing the same thing, that we know there's technology that could have prevented that crash.
Mr. Sumwalt, can I do a follow-up on that as well on PTC? This is technology that, as you mentioned, you've been pushing for 45 years, and the railroads kind of dragged their heels on implementing this, and as a result got a congressional extension. Are lives at risk right now because of that delay? Can you speak to that?
I think that every day that PTC is not in place, we run the risk of another Amtrak crash at Philadelphia, or another Bronx crash, or another Chatsworth. Every day that we don't have this technology, we are at continued risk.
And who do you lay the blame at? The railroads for dragging their feet? Congress for giving them the extension?
Well, at the Safety Board, we're not in the business of pointing fingers or laying blame, but my position is, and our position is, just as I said, for every day that goes by without PTC, we risk another accident.
Let me add to that this risk is not about finding out why things haven't happened yet. Instead, it's about looking at the future to see what we can fix in the future. Yes, please.
Still on PTC, we hear a lot from the railroads about how difficult it is to implement, the freight railroads, how difficult it is to implement PTC, and from the commuter railroads, that it's very expensive. Do they, do their arguments hold water with you? Do you think that, there are solid reasons why these things haven't been implemented, or do you think that people have been delaying?
If it weren't difficult, it probably wouldn't be on this list, but having said that, Amtrak, for example, has said the entire Northeast Corridor is now PTC protected, so we know it's doable. You want to add to that?
Thanks. Not to be a microphone hog, but we're here to say what needs to be done, and I'm not here to defend or point fingers at anybody, but to the railroad's credit, they have invested about $6 billion so far in this technology, and I've met with many of the railroads, and there's a lot of people working on this, but it's critical, it's safety critical that this system be implemented as soon as possible. And we saw 7 years between the passage of the Rail Safety Improvement Act in 2008 and 2015. And is it going to take another 5 years or another 3 years for it to be implemented? And if that's the case, that's unacceptable. Thank you.
Yes, please.
You talk about improving rail transit safety oversight. I mean, we just had the FAST Act passed. We have rail transit oversight provisions in MAP 21 that were never really implemented. Are you looking to anything next or this year that will really show you that the FTA is bolstering its safety oversight, or can you point to any specific kind of actions that would give you a hint that this is being improved, the oversight being improved?
Thank you for the question. For those of you who may not know, the Federal Transit Administration is relatively new in the business of safety. For most of its existence, it mostly was a funding agency. It was not involved in safety. So they're on a learning curve now. Most of the safety that was provided for mass transit was at the state level. So they're on a learning curve about not only this new responsibility, but also how to do it through the states. The complication in Washington is that we have 3 jurisdictions involved, Maryland, Virginia, and D.C., and herding those cats has been a challenge. So the process of having the federal role go through the states which works in most states where most of them are single state overseers, is far less complicated than what we have in D.C. So we're looking for the best way to work it out in this complicated situation where there are 3 jurisdictions involved, and we're all pushing to learn how to make that work. Yes, please.
Mr. Chairman, on the issue of reducing fatigue-related accidents, could you talk about, do you see the congressionally mandated review of the hours of service 2013 rule that FEMCSA is conducting? Do you see that as a step toward addressing that issue?
Yes, the hours of service rules are a very critical piece of the total puzzle, and we're looking at that as one of the many success stories from this most wanted list, is that we've been pushing fatigue and rest and duty time rules for quite some time. But it is only a part of it, because I mentioned the Cranberry example where he was in complete compliance with the rest and duty time rules, but yet he'd been awake for 28 hours before the crash. So it's a piece of it. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. Yes, please.
So one of your initiatives is talking about the phase out of DOT 111s for flammable liquids by rail, and obviously there's been a lot of action on that, first by the federal government or by the administration, and now by Congress to kind of alter what the administration had proposed. Do you guys have a stance on what type of phase out is the right kind of phase out, given that the rule is being litigated? You know, how quickly do these tank cars actually need to be phased out?
I'll refer that again to Member Sumall, but the overview is sooner is better.
I think that's good.
Yes, please.
Chairman Hart, I'm sort of struck by the fact that there's a theme through a number of these of using technology to reduce accidents, and sort of a history of that in commercial aviation. I mean, do you see that as a growing trend in all the modes?
I do see that as a growing trend in all the modes. Humans, on their best day, can still make mistakes, and so in many cases, these technology solutions are safety nets for the reality that humans make mistakes. So I do see that happening in every mode, but of course, we have also seen in aviation with advancing automation, for example, that the good news is there's more automation. The bad news is there's more automation. There are issues that are associated with implementing automation that will have to be addressed with respect to, for example, we're already seeing in the self-driver in the driverless cars, we're already seeing issues because the driverless cars are programmed to go the speed limit. And we know that there's a huge accident rate associated with disparity in speed. So if humans aren't going the speed limit and the driverless car is going the speed limit, that in itself is an issue we're going to have to address. So there will be issues associated with implementing the automation, but ultimately I think automation has an enormous potential to save lives, especially on the highways. Did you want to? Okay, yes, please.
Hi. Given the emphasis on technology, is the complexity of the technology that is available a potential barrier to progress? For example, with PTC, I believe the technology that NTSB began to advocate for in the late 60s was not as complicated as the technology today, and if you talk to the FCC, for example, it seems that there are all kinds of complications that are having to be worked out that are proving to be very difficult.
Well, to the extent that's a highway issue, I'm going to defer to Member Weiner, whose issue that is.
It's a rail issue.
It is. I thought it was a rail.
I'm thinking of highway. We can have the rail answer too. We can do it. It is all modes.
Having spent first part of the week at the Detroit Auto Show, I've been impressed with the technology development that's available for automobiles. The difficulty, of course, is that some of this technology, which is really probably highly effective at reducing rear-end collisions, is not available or is not available as standard equipment in many of the cars. So some of the cars you have to buy the high-end luxury package in order to get the safety equipment. So we're promoting a suite of safety systems for the automobiles and promoting those as standard equipment to the extent we can get people to do that.
Would you like to address the rail? Member Sumall?
Thank you. And from a rail point of view, you're right. We first recommended some form of positive train control after a 1969 rail collision in Darien, Connecticut. And we didn't come out and say it has to have GPS, and we said, but some form of system that prevents train-to-train collisions is needed. And so the current PTC will prevent train-to-train collisions, overspeed derailments, protect work zones, and protect against switches that are left in the wrong position. And so you're right, we were pretty much performance-based in 1970 when we first called for what is now positive train control, but we have been calling for some sort of technology to prevent against these sorts of things for a long time. I hope that answers your question sufficiently.
I guess what I'm wondering is whether there should be, whether anyone has considered placing more emphasis on simplicity rather than complexity when it comes to these important technologies.
I think the chairman would agree that our recommendations are usually performance-based, and we don't care exactly how that is carried out as long as the end objective is met. And sometimes a simpler solution is a better solution. But anyway, thank you.
Yes, please.
Just a follow-up question. I know a lot of these items on the list have been on the list in previous years. Can you point to anything that's particularly new? For example, is barring all cell phone use, including hands-free, happening for the first time this year?
Well, as we see emerging issues in our accident investigation experience, then new issues come on the list this year, and we do have several issues that are new on the list this year, and some are variations on a theme. So for example, when we look at improve rail transit safety oversight, previously it was improve mass transit safety. So mass transit is buses, it's rails, it's ferry boats, it's lots of things, but the accident experience has shown that we're seeing problems particularly in rail mass transit. So that's why that's new in that sense, that the focus was narrowed to just rail mass transit as opposed to all mass transit. Any further questions? Well, thank you very much, and thank you for helping us get the word out on these important issues.